Dear life as I knew it. In the beginning, I only noticed you skipping around me, blowing with the winds of change that carried along whispers of what was to come. You had a mischievous smile that hinted at your desire to stir up trouble. Flashy headlines, sudden cancellations, and groundless rumors distracted me, and you jumped on the opportunity to escape my vision. The life I had known had disappeared like the Cheshire Cat, with only the memory of your visage remaining. My days morphed from the cherished routine of sports, school, and friends to a terrifying new reality of isolation. I panicked as if I were a mom who lost their child in the grocery store, except truly I was the child, and the grocery store was the vast sea of life. I was lost, drowning, overwhelmed even, and instead of swimming, I was too busy trying to find you, my only life jacket. Dear life as I knew it, and yet I did not drown. The days rolled by, and the crashing of the waves became a steady rhythm, although I could not ease the seasickness that churned in my soul. You had abandoned me, and this fact would remain forever etched in stone, despite how strongly I willed for it to be false. I bobbed across the seas, painfully aware of all the expected milestones that no longer graced my path. But there was nothing anyone could do to reverse the unyielding hands of time. So, for the first time in my life, I began to swim. Pushing against the current and directing my path in this unpredictable terrain, I chose not to beg and plead for something else to keep me afloat, but to take the reins of my own destiny. And as such, when I stopped hopelessly searching the night sky for that milestones that had passed, I was able to finally see the light reflected on the water from the lighthouse of new opportunities. Dear life as I knew it. It has been 1 year, 3 weeks, and 4 days since you left me. Your absence has been dearly missed, but to this very moment, everything has been dulled, as all things do get with time. I have realized that the promises you made me were wonderful illusions, but they crippled me in that they made me feel as if I could not be happy without you. In truth, the master of my happiness is none other than myself, if only I have the courage to reach for it. So in this past year, I learned to enjoy Friday morning walks to the coffee shop with my family, endless late-night drives with friends, and hilarious Zoom trivia games with my relatives. It may not have been the fantastical trip abroad, the clamor in the stands of the final football game, and the breathtaking prom that you promised me, but these tender, unexpected moments filled my heart nonetheless. I now know that there's no guaranteed life jacket to save me from the unknown, and that I have the strength to keep swimming and find my bearings in the strange, new waters beneath me. So thank you for disappearing, although you knew it would hurt me. I may not have known it then, but this was your true gift, the strength of independence. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Emma Kester is here tonight on behalf of Mrs. Trinkner's creative writing course. We sincerely appreciate such a spectacular opening. And with that, we're off. Hello. Thank you for being here for the fourth sort of annual Erie X. We missed last year, unfortunately, but let's not talk about old stuff. I am Jake Rupp, and I will be your MC this evening. As I prepared for this gig, I was given scripts, student MCs created from previous years. It's far better than what I would have come up with on my own, so I'm going to steal a good chunk of it, for instance. Let's get you oriented, shall we? Behind you are 2 exits, and by those exits are a volunteer with a basket which you may place donations in to the Erie X Scholarship Fund. At the end of the evening tonight, we'll draw the name of one presenter and award that person a scholarship for however many dollars are on that board. And you guys are crushing it so far. That board will update throughout the evening as more donations come in. In the hallway are refreshments available for any donation, and again, goes towards that sum. Behind you on the landing is the Erie Tiger Network. If you have loved ones who couldn't make it, send them a text as they can watch live from anywhere in the world at erietiger.network.com. In front of you is this stage, and this evening, 10 different amazing ideas will be presented to you. If you aren't familiar, Erie X is our version of a TED Talk style presentation. These students all have a purpose, and I'm excited that you get to see all of them achieve those purposes. So here's where I stopped stealing from students and discuss how Erie X changed my life. I'm getting sentimental, folks. 4 years ago, I attended Erie X to watch my niece present. I taught elsewhere at the time, and I was happy there. Everything was going great, standard Wednesday night. 2 hours later, Erie X was over, and I knew I desperately needed to be a part of this school and be involved with what I saw on this stage. What the students presented then, what these students are going to present to you tonight, is a demonstration not just of academic excellence, but of genuine caring and thoughtfulness and hopefulness. I was floored. I said to my friend sitting next to me that I desperately wanted to work at Erie. That evening, I found out there was an English opening that closed 48 hours later. I applied to a job I didn't even know I needed when I woke up that day with more tenacity than I'd ever pursued anything. Less than a week later, I was a tiger and I've never looked back. The script I'm stealing from is the one my niece wrote when she hosted this. Full circle. What up, Maddie Deacon? I feel confident that something you see tonight will inspire you in the same way, because this night has everything. Essential oils, minimalism, we have trust, fashion, decomposition, so much decomposition. We have plastic, we have politics, we have poop, we have poetry, alliteration. Thank you for being here. Tickets were tough to come by. And that means someone you are very proud of feels the same way about you. So, as Emma said, let's find our bearings in these strange new waters. Up first, from AP Research, help me welcome Mr. Drew Jordan.
What if I told you every year $63 billion were lost needlessly? And to accompany this, we've seen a 93% increase in anxiety screenings. Even worse, 24% of adults feel their mental health needs have gone unaddressed, since this number has not improved since 2011. Many illnesses are treatable with drugs, but at what cost? I know my family and I have always giggled at the last 15 seconds of medicine commercials when they go over the side effects. They usually start with stuff like headaches and dizziness, and then end in severe debilitation and death. What if there is a shockingly simple solution to avoiding drugs that may help reduce or even possibly eliminate all three of these scary statistics? Sleep, or more precisely, the lack of sleep. Sleeplessness every single year leads to a loss of $63 billion due to worker unproductivity, along with heightened anxiety and countless mental illnesses. This has led me to ponder the question, what can be done to help Americans achieve longer and more restful sleep? So I did some research into how to get more sleep. I stumbled across many different solutions, from sleeping pills to therapy. I shied away from artificial drugs for reasons mentioned before. And just as I felt I was running out of ideas, I found a research paper about using lavender essential oil. Now, researchers tested many subjects and came up with very positive results, that lavender helps subjects sleep longer and more restfully. I found it extremely interesting that they looked to a plant to help achieve better sleep, as opposed to developing another drug. But after looking to lavender oil more, I found a lot more research, so I decided to find something new and different. Along the way, I found one paper posted by a man named Amiko Watanuki, who went to a nursing home and studied patients with dementia. He tested a combination of lavender, orange, cypress, pine, and cedarwood essential oil to see if it helped them sleep better, and he found very positive results. So I decided to dig more into each component. I found that cedarwood was relatively untested, so I decided to make a study out of it. In an unrelated test on cedar, researchers tested the effect of cedarwood essential oil on rats. They wanted to determine if it could be used as a sedative. They cleverly devised an experiment which blocked the rat's olfactory, or smell receptors, to see if cedarwood itself was a sedative, or if it was simply the smell. They did find it was a sedative, and it was not from the scent, but something in the molecular composition was altering the brain's chemistry. Reading that was all I felt I needed to move forward and ask the question to address this gap in knowledge. To what extent, if any, does cedarwood essential oil applied topically have the ability to help Americans get more restful sleep over 2 weeks? So I set out to test this. I gathered 15 people, a bunch of cedarwood essential oil, and talked to a few teachers to create a sound method. I had all the subjects start by applying vegetable oil to their foreheads to make sure it wasn't a placebo. I did this for 1 week and then had them switch to cedarwood for the second week. Every night they recorded significant factors such as stress, time it took to fall asleep, time preparing for bed, sleep duration, and restedness waking up. Here's the data I collected. This is a bit hard to interpret, so let me explain. The number on the y-axis is inversely proportional to the degree of confidence for which our claim exists. For example, the green bar is just under 0.1, so we can say with just over 90% confidence, there's strong evidence cedarwood essential oil has an impact on sleep duration. The lower the bar, the better. If we decided to lower our confidence a mere 2%, cedarwood essential oil would also have an impact on restedness waking up. This is amazing news. I have data that my treatment worked, that I helped people sleep better. The subjects didn't know the cedarwood from the vegetable oil. All they did was record how they felt. So now on to the next step. I needed to make sure no other factors were at play. So I graphed all my data and calculated a correlation coefficient between stress and sleep, male and female, employed and unemployed, and got a lot of data that looks just like this. It was very random, skewed, and with a lot of outliers and a low correlation coefficient, meaning the chance of something that I tested relating to this better sleep was almost zero. Ultimately, my results showed that cedarwood has a positive impact on sleep, regardless of other factors. Now, I feel this picture shows how I felt a lot of the time. Trying to get people all the materials they needed and have them send data back, even after reaching out 3 times, felt like staring at a massive brick wall. But eventually, I got around most of these issues. A few issues I couldn't get around were the low population size. I could only find 15 people willing to participate in my study. Larger populations might have yielded more definite results. Another factor that possibly interfered was the short period of time that they were tested over. 2 weeks might seem like a long time, but ideally subjects would be tracked for over a year to make sure that there were no seasonal effects on sleep. The final limitation derives from subject self-reporting. In a perfect world, this would have been conducted in a sleep laboratory, where exact anxiety levels could be measured with definite tests, and sleep duration could be measured down to the minute. Regardless, this experiment was still amazing and yielded great results. Modern medicine has its place. Without vaccines and medical treatments, Earth's population would be a quarter of what it is today. Science may never advance where it is now. But we also have to consider the drawbacks of some of these treatments. The only reported side effect of cedarwood essential oil is a potential allergic reaction, as opposed to something like Silanor, a common sleep aid with side effects including, but not limited to, dizziness, drowsiness, cold symptoms such as stuffy nose, sneezing, and sore throat, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, loss of appetite, dry mouth, weight changes, lack of coordination. Need I go on? So I sat back after getting my data and seeing all the benefits of essential oils and thought to myself, why in the world would no companies research prescribing essential oils to patients? So I did some digging and found very interesting data. The primary reason was lack of profitability. Since essential oils are a naturally occurring substance, they can't be patented or trademarked. This means that they can't be marked up like most other drugs. Many of you, I'm sure, know about the common ethical debate around insulin markups, but this exists for most other drugs. That's why pharmaceutical companies have been so focused on creating these artificial treatments. It has led to successful companies, I will admit, but that got me thinking about success. I Googled most successful people, and of course, I found what most of you would expect to see. People such as Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, or Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, along with various artists such as John Lennon and Elvis Presley. So I spent a lot of time pondering, why in today's world do we define success as fame and fortune? Why do we not define success as who has made the greatest impact on others? What if pharmaceutical companies tried to make the biggest impact on their customers instead of trying to make the most money? What would a world look like if we were focused on community instead of profitability? I've come to the conclusion that cedarwood essential oil has the ability to help people like you and me get better sleep. I aspire for our society to adapt so hopefully more individuals will be able to walk into a doctor's office and be prescribed a treatment with even better abilities to help people than what is commonly prescribed today. I encourage you all to hold the same standards I do. Let's build up our community, help each other along with the rest of the world, battle sleeplessness. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew Jordan. Ladies and gentlemen, I promised you poop and plastic. We are getting poop and plastic. I'm a man of my word. Next up, from AP Research, Miss Allie Morton.
How many of you have ever looked at a pile of poop before and said to yourself, wow, that stuff looks like it has potential? Okay, so probably not many of us, but what if I told you that this waste might actually have an important role to play in our society? Let me explain. I began my research with one thing in mind: plastic pollution. I'm sure we've all seen this before, the views of ugly piles upon piles of plastic, such as this one right here, located in the North Pacific Ocean that spans the size of Texas. Plastic pollution, though, goes further than its ugliness. Plastic pollution can pose immense harm towards crops, towards humans, towards aquatic life, and this is all because it accumulates in our environment for decades. But plastic pollution, the severity of this problem will likely reduce if we had a way to biologically degrade plastic in a timely manner. And this is where polylactic acid, or PLA, enters the picture. A recently popularized biodegradable plastic that degrades usually within a few months into carbon dioxide, methane, and water. Cool, right? Well, this biopolymer, despite having awesome potential, does have some limitations. PLA requires industrial compost facilities to degrade, but in these compost facilities, they're usually limited to about 30-day cycles to degrade. But as I said before, PLA usually requires a few months to degrade. And so these compost facilities that are accepting PLA have to landfill them. But in landfills, PLA actually can't degrade because there's no oxygen. So it essentially defeats the purpose of using this green plastic. Okay, so it does seem a little useless right now to use this biopolymer given these limitations, but I can assure you that we have ways to solve this. One way we could do this is by finding ways to accelerate the biodegradation of PLA. How do we do this? Well, we can alter the pH. Studies have shown that if we make the pH more alkaline, or above 7, then we can accelerate the biodegradation of this biopolymer. Okay, cool, but how do we realistically do this? Well, I found one study that used an alkaline steel operation waste. Cool, waste product, sounds like a great solution to me. But the problem is that I came across was, how much steel operation waste do we have, one? And how safely can this be added to compost? So then I began my search for an alkaline waste material that can be safely added to compost and is abundant. And this is where I came across manure. Specifically, cow and chicken manure, believe it or not, is characterized with being very alkaline because of the specific elements contained in them. So, because of their abundance in organic characteristics, This would certainly be a realistic approach to this problem. So then, this got me down to my research question. To what extent, if any, can agricultural animal manure amendments, cow or chicken, have on the rate of biodegradation of PLA in simulated industrial compost facility conditions in order to determine potential solutions for improving the handling of PLA and compost facilities? So it's time to get some gloves on and get to experimenting. So in a nutshell, I set up 9 beakers, 6 of which either contained cow or chicken manure with compost, and 3 of which just contained compost, no manure, to act as my control. And then in each, I placed a 2 by 2 centimeter piece of PLA. Okay, so then I got to experimenting. Unfortunately, I began by setting up thermophilic conditions, or temperatures that are higher than 140 degrees Fahrenheit. This was definitely hard, but after some serious trial and error, I ended up using an Innova sous vide, a French cooking machine. Random but true. And then I officially started my 10-day trial. I was unfortunately limited to this 10-day time because my initial 30-day trial did have some data limitations, but I carried on anyways. And in this trial, I carefully monitored the amount of moisture and oxygen to more accurately simulate a compost facility. And then I also measured the pH to determine whether or not manure does fully influence alkalinity. And then at the end of my 10 days, I took out the PLA samples individually, dried them, and then to measure the biodegradation, I used a % mass loss equation as well as a visual analysis. And here's what happened. So excitingly, I was able to confirm my hypothesis that manure as an alkaline waste amendment does influence accelerated biodegradation for PLA. So I did this through 3 measurements. I did pH, % mass loss, as well as visual analysis. So in my first pH section, I determined that the samples that contained manure did have the most alkalinity. So you can see here, chicken manure had around 8.5 to 9, cow somewhere around 8 to 7.5, and then we had compost, which remained steady at 7.5. So that shows that manure was the most alkaline. And then we did % mass loss. In my % mass loss, I determined that the samples that contained manure did degrade the most. Chicken manure actually degraded from 16 to 55%, cow around 8%, and then my control just about 2%, not very much. And then to confirm these findings more, I performed a t-test, and then this t-test determined that these values were statistically significantly different. And then, as I said before, I did perform a 30-day trial prior to this study. So validating these findings that I got more, if I were to have combined my 30-day trial with my present 10-day trial, this suggests that chicken manure had the potential, or would have degraded 100%, cow manure somewhere around 16%, and controlled somewhere around 8%. And then I did my last snippet of my experiment, and I determined that through visual analysis, chicken manure samples were the only ones which showed visual signs of biodegradation, interestingly. I think this is because in my initial, as I said before, chicken manure had the highest alkalinity, so this could certainly be it, although this isn't entirely conclusive, but this shows, if anything, that chicken manure has potential. Okay, so I did have some limitations in my study, of course. I had a limited 10-day trial, and I also had occasional temperature fluctuations. But here's what I can say for certain. These results are compelling. I produced not 1, but 2 trials suggesting that manure as an alkaline waste amendment has the potential to accelerate the biodegradation of PLA. Cool. So here, of course, we do, though, need to ensure that manure does influence this result completely, because this could have potentially been attributed to randomized factors like the microbes that were on the farm that I collected the manure from. If we do determine that manure does fully influence this result, then here are the implications. We can simultaneously improve agricultural industries and compost facilities by using this solution. If you think about it, we're using waste from agricultural industries, which there's clearly an abundance of in them, and then we're lifting that burden off the farmer's shoulders, we're bringing that over to compost facilities, and we're improving the acceptance of PLA in these compost facilities. And then on a wider scale, this could potentially reduce plastic pollution. If by finding a way to improve the degradation of PLA, encourages more consumers to buy PLA, then this would mean that more consumers are buying the PLA, less consumers are buying the conventional plastics, and less conventional plastics are accumulating our environment, and then less plastic pollution. This is not to say that PLA alone, though, could fully mitigate plastic pollution, but it could certainly contribute. And my results, if anything, suggest a new way towards mitigating plastic pollution by using a material that we often overlook, manure. So maybe next time we look at a pile of poop or waste or whatever, we don't see it as waste. Maybe we see it as potential. Thank you.
All right, so just a check-in and a reminder, as of right now, college is $306 cheaper for somebody, and I can hear you out there like, MC Jake Rupp, how do I donate? What do I do? On your brochure, on the back, there's a QR code. Don't be shy. Yeah, feel free to turn on your phone now if you're interested. We have an intermission too. If you are at home, the talented Mr. Bird has links all over the place that you can use as well. So now, because Erie X is wild, we are going to go from poop and plastic to political movements and fashion choices. From speech and debate, Miss Julia Brink.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to invite you to take a moment and look down. Look down at the clothes that you're wearing right now and think about the decisions that led you to choosing these clothes today. If that feels a little awkward, take a look at me and notice that I'm not wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, but that's mostly because Miss Arita would probably just kick me off the stage at that point. But in a moment, I'm going to ask you once again to look at your outfit and examine the choices that led you to choosing those clothes. But for now, I invite you to sit back and listen as we learn about the power of fashion and the way that the world views our fashion choices. In 2004, Cal State Fullerton sophomore Blythe Hill began learning about the injustice of human trafficking. But she felt hopeless because she wasn't a doctor or a lawyer or a politician, but she instead had interests in fashion and trend analysis and blogging. But 4 years later, in 2009, Blythe challenged herself to wear a dress every single day in December, which ultimately led to the creation of the Dressember Foundation. Every year since then, more and more people have joined her in this challenge to wear a dress or a tie every single day in December to raise money and awareness to fight human trafficking. With a dress as her flag, Blythe, with the help of thousands of advocates across the world, has helped raise over $12 million to fight human trafficking. Blythe is a prime example of someone who truly understands the power of intentional fashion. You see, our fashion choices are making statements whether we intend them to or not. Michelle Obama is yet another example of someone who truly understood the power of intentional fashion and learned how to make statements through her fashion. At the beginning of her time as First Lady, Michelle Obama refused to make an extensive remark on her role as the first Black First Lady. By refusing to make this statement, she created this mysterious void that intrigued fans and critics, prompting them to interpret her fashion and style choices. Stephanie Schaefer, a published author, defines this strategy of not making statements about intentions behind fashion choices as embodied rhetoric. Michelle carefully articulates embodied rhetoric using her physical presence and Black womanhood as a signifier that speaks through fashion statements, White House rituals, and the First Lady's role as an exemplar of American womanhood. To fully understand Michelle's embodied rhetoric, we will examine 3 of her outfits and how these outfits made an impact on the role of First Lady. First, we will look at how her iconic purple dress laid the foreground for her style choices for the next 8 years. Next, using her black and white dress as an example, we will see how through her fashion, Michelle was also making statements about racial stereotyping and black femininity. Ending with the examination of how a simple H&M dress made an echoing statement about post-feminism and American identity. As she became a more prominent person in the spotlight, Michelle began to adopt her own personal style. And of course, this transition took time to occur. One of her most notable outfits during this time was her 2008 Democratic National Convention purple dress. This dress was a sleeveless, knee-length V-neck Mariah Pinto dress accessorized with a strand of pearls and a black Alaya belt. Although you are probably thinking, okay, cool, a purple dress, but how is this revolutionary at all? Well, investigative author and reporter Rachel Swarns actually says that this dress was one of the most remarkable political transitions in history. Michelle used this purple dress to create her fashionable and independent First Lady persona that she maintained for years to come. But truly, what is the role of First Lady? How did Michelle's actions differ from those that came before her? Well, the role of First Lady is seen as more of an ornamental position within the White House. She doesn't always hold a lot of political power, but is held to excruciatingly high standards as representative wife and symbol of the president's administration. Even though she holds an official position, the First Lady's education is often overlooked as the public focuses more on her latest outfit and hairstyle than her political influence. But knowing the glitzy, accessory nature of the role of First Lady, no one was surprised when Michelle began to change the role and redefined her position as mom-in-chief, combining both the maternal aspects as well as the political influence she knew she had. Her purple dress combined with her White House gardening and Let's Move initiative reaffirmed her new image as mom-in-chief. Now, Michelle's strong and well-defined arms were a sign that she was a participant in her own advocacy to stay active. But her penchant for sleeveless attire went far beyond her love of exercise. Her bare arms were a sign of youth, readiness, and confidence in herself. Award-winning magazine writer and editor Mandy Norwood wrote the book Michelle's Style, celebrating the First Lady of fashion. And in her book, she states, "Toned arms are one of the few signs of youth. When we see our First Lady's arms, we are reminded that there is this youthful presidency in office. And if nothing else, we hope that the passion and strength of youth will get us through these trying times." Now, youth may not seem like a very significant thing within the White House, but cognitive psychologist and neurologist Daniel Levin, says that youth within the White House can actually be a benefit because younger people are generally proven to be quicker thinkers, faster learners, and more comfortable with evolving technology. As a Harvard and Princeton alumnus, Michelle knew how to work hard and how to succeed. Now, most of us, when we're ready to work, we roll up our sleeves. But Michelle said, forget the sleeves altogether and let's get down to business. This decision to not wear sleeves on her clothing showed the public that she was ready to get down to work right away. Her education, combined with her high level of confidence, helped her accomplish anything she set her mind to. Now, most tall women avoid wearing high heels or speaking too loudly or really making too much of a big statement because they're afraid they'll come off as intimidating. But Michelle embraced her height and wasn't afraid to show off her strong arms. Michelle's decision to wear sleeveless clothing helped her establish her youthfulness, excitement to work, and confidence in her own abilities. Many First Ladies before Michelle chose to wear more professional business suits and pantsuits, but by choosing dresses instead of this traditional wear, Obama not only created a new look for herself, but also redefined the way that the public viewed the Obama marriage. The Obama marriage was seen as this perfect union between Barack and Michelle because they weren't vying for the same political power. Michelle's makeover also helped redefine the presidency as an on-level partnership, which may be best epitomized by the couple's iconic fist bump before Barack took stage to accept his nomination in 2008. Michelle used fashion and its cultural meanings to create a new look for herself and also redefine the presidency and make it less of a one-man show. As part of the role of First Lady, Michelle Obama guest starred on many talk shows and game shows such as Ellen and The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. Now in June of 2011, Michelle appeared on the morning talk show The View, wearing a scoop neck, sleeveless, knee-length, black and white patterned Donna Rico dress. Now when asked about the intentions behind this dress, Obama slyly evaded the question by simply commenting on how much she loved the simplicity of the black and white dress pattern. This evasion pushed reporters and critics to speculate if Obama was actually making statements about racial stereotyping and black femininity with the coloration of her dress. As she became a prominent person in the spotlight, Obama's body has been subjected to many racial stereotypes and a gaze that dissected and stigmatized individual parts of her body. Black female stereotypes loom large in comments made by reporters and journalists remarking on things such as her allegedly large buttocks and referencing the black mama stereotype. Now, many biographies written about Michelle take different stances on the specific intentions behind this black and white dress. Obama's memorial speech for Maya Angelou marks a rare occasion when she spoke out about the difficulty of positioning herself in a racially hurtful and white hegemonic discourse of beauty and womanhood. Her memorial speech states that the repetitiveness of female black stereotypes has turned race into a rhetorical cul-de-sac. And hoping to break this cycle, Michelle used her time as First Lady to normalize the female black body and make it into a symbol of universal American womanhood. Now, many First Ladies before Michelle got caught up in the wealth and the attention of their position and forgot how to relate to much of the American society. But Michelle balanced her wealth and high societal status well by continuing to search for a sense of normalcy wherever she could to make herself more accessible to the public. For example, in February of 2011, Michelle appeared on the Today Show wearing a navy blue and white speckled V-neck, roughly $39.95 H&M dress. This dress ignited a controversy among spectators, some wondering if reports of Michelle wearing the dress were even real, some saying that this dress was a power move, but some saying that for the First Lady to choose such a dress was a disgrace. But in classic Michelle Obama behavior, when asked about the intentions behind this dress, she simply affirmed that it was from H&M. Throughout her time as First Lady, Michelle always seemed to be making statements about her self-image and the role of the First Lady through her fashion. Spectators believed that with this dress, she was simply searching for a sense of normalcy. Throughout her 8 years as First Lady, Michelle refused to simply be an accessory to Barack's presidency. So by leveraging her fashion to gain even more time in the spotlight, she was able to draw more attention to her policy matters and campaigns as First Lady. Through her fashion, she redefined the role as First Lady, continued to search for a sense of normalcy, and straightened herself in the crooked room of race and gender misconception by adding yet another facet to her performance as First Lady. Blythe and Michelle are examples of two women that truly understood the importance of intentional fashion. With simply a dress, Blythe created an organization that is fighting human trafficking across the world and saving lives. And with a few simple outfits, Michelle redefined the role of First Lady and made statements about what she believes in. Now I invite you to take another moment and look at what you're wearing tonight. What statements are you making? What statements do you wish you were making? You see, every single morning we get the opportunity to do the same thing, to make a statement about who we are and what we believe in. So be someone that takes advantage of that opportunity and chooses to be intentional about their fashion. Thank you.
I hope my blue stripes are making the statement that you should donate money. Thank you. So, I'm back to plagiarizing old scripts. Hopefully, obviously, you noticed the difference between those presentations. So if you look at your brochure, you'll see some of our presentations are AP research presentations where students have aimed to conduct their own experiment, filling in some kind of gap in existing research, like Drew's or like Allie's. But like Julia, for speech and debate, students were aiming to speak informatively on social activism. You can see below each presenter's name, what class they were in this year, and get a sense of what they were challenged to do. So, with that in mind, we will bring back AP Research and welcome Christian Brooks.
Hello. Today, I'm going to be talking about trust. Trust being an incredibly important thing in life. So, what is the importance of trust? Trust is something that not only is a thing that governs how we, create laws, how we talk to people, how we interact, how we work at jobs, how we get jobs, how we talk, how we converse at jobs. It governs a lot of what we do in daily life, whether we realize it or not. So trust is odd in that it revolves around truthfulness. Without truthfulness, you can't have trust. Without trust, you can't have truthfulness. So without one, the other doesn't exist. And if you could say it was, you'd really be lying to yourself, and that would be a breach of trust, wouldn't it? Socialization, in being reliant on trust, is reliant on the idea that through socializing, through talking, we build bonds of trust because we trust that another person will interact. We trust that another person will be interested or share certain values or share a certain idea. We trust that they do something. That's how we socialize. We talk, we trust in what is told, we trust in the ideas and the information we're given. Trust is incredibly important in that it's how humans bond, how we create information, how we share information, how we do a lot of things in daily life. Without trust, if you couldn't trust what somebody told you or how to brush your teeth, would you really do it? If you couldn't trust the ability of a medicine to help cure you of illness, would you use it? If you can't trust something, you're less likely to use it. You're less likely to engage in it. You're less likely to socialize with someone you know you can't trust, or you can't trust what you tell them or what they tell you. Socialization is inherently reliant on this trust because when you're in a group, you have to trust those people around you, right? If you don't, you're not really socializing. You're just there speaking. Because in its relationships or work or talking to someone on the street or even in a personable relationship, trust is incredibly important. You have to trust that the other person is engaged. You have to trust that the other person is present, that they're listening, that they're paying attention. You have to trust yourself in that what you're saying is really what you mean or what you want. So my test was to look at how does trust work in a social system? Social systems being how groups of people interact or how we create governments. So on level of governments, how do we trust those above us to regulate and uphold the laws we ask of them? And in personal social systems, how do we use trust to set rules? How do we use those rules as boundaries of trust? And what happens when people don't follow those rules? So, when applied to real life, we have two main ways in which we can define a social system: a hierarchy and a cooperative. A hierarchy is much like a job in that you have a certain person on top who's in charge of another person, who's in charge of another person, who's in charge of another person, or a group of people. Those levels have to trust in each other. A manager trusts that his subordinate will do tasks and make sure that people are in line and that they're doing their work. Subordinates must trust their employers to make sure that they're being paid, that they're given somewhat free time. They're managed as people, not just numbers or objects. They have to trust in each other, going up the chain and down the chain. And when we look back at history, when there hasn't been trust between kings and peasants, we've had revolutions, wherein the peasants didn't trust the kings to regulate them, and the kings didn't trust the peasants to regulate themselves. So what is a social cooperative? A social cooperative is much like a group of friends. A group of friends, although there may be a hierarchy with who's in charge on the day-to-day basis, is really a group that works together. That group organizes itself in a natural means based off of a natural order. That natural order can change on a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis, based on who's there and what they're doing. It always changes, but the cooperative is one all the same. The cooperative relies on the person and the people within it to make and uphold its rules. To uphold those rules, they have to use trust. So how do you test how you use trust in a social cooperative? Well, how do you do that is you play a game of cards. Now, in this game of cards, we're playing a game called Cheat. In Cheat, you're allowed to lie, cheat, and steal. Those are all perfectly normal things to do, right? So when you do those perfectly normal things, it's considered within the boundaries of trust. You trust they're going to play the game, and that's part of the game. Now, there's certain things you can do to make a game where there's opportunities to go outside of that trust. That's what I did. So in order to do this, we had a game of Cheat wherein players were given 15 chips. Chips acting much like money does. Each player was given 15 chips. Out of the 5 players, you can guess how many chips that is, because I don't really want to do the math. But with those chips, they were able to pay each other in bribes. If I give you 10 chips, you won't tell anybody that I'm putting down the wrong card next. Or if you give me 2 chips, I'll make sure that you have the right cards, or we'll exchange cards, or things like that. They can cheat because they trust that the other person won't give them away, or that they'll keep up their end of the deal. Well, when you don't uphold that trust, we wrote it down. So in order to do that, we quantified it, writing down every time somebody made a deal, every time they betrayed a deal, every time they gave a bribe, and every time they won. This is a graph of all the participants' moves over all the games, being 4 games. Played a game 4 times, where they were able to keep the chips from the previous game each time. So remember, in game 1, everybody started with 15 chips. In game 1, players worked together. They thought, well, if we trust each other and we work together, we can all put ourselves in positions where we have advantages. If we can put ourselves in positions where we have advantages, we can make it so that one of us can get closer and they can make the move and they can win the game, right? Everybody has a roughly equal amount of chips starting. Makes sense. There's an even playing field. Now, when there isn't an even playing field, things change. Things being that some people have a very large advantage because they got a lot of chips and they honored a lot of deals starting off, and those not so advantaged are people who would make deals and would lose chips. So the trust balance between those who did not have chips changed, and how people acted changed. And from this, you start to observe a pattern. We go to game 3, we go to game 4. You see, when more people have even chips, they start to cooperate. When less people have the same amount of chips, they start to work against each other. And they'll align in these sort of factions, which we see in real life too. When you have groups of coworkers that are pitted against each other, they'll align into small groups. Those groups have similar interests, they have similar advantages, similar disadvantages. They work together because they trust the person next to them will help them to a common goal. All the players in this social system did that when they had a common goal. We can all win because we all have the advantage too. The moment they lost that, they broke into factions. Now in game 2, as we see, people started working against each other, right? Well, here's the issue. When they started working against each other, something interesting happened. People would only take an advantage that they absolutely, positively knew they could get a hold of. And that's the moment in which they would betray someone's trust. Because there was an absolute advantage. There was an absolute advantage that if I do this thing that I know no one will like, but I can profit from it, and I can make sure at least someone profits from it too. I can build a bridge of trust that can get me to another opportunity. If I tell this person, if I win, I will give you 5 chips, and
and they make sure I win, they get those 5 chips, I've just built a bridge of trust. Every time they win, and they make me a similar deal, I win. I can accrue more chips over time, and I can work with somebody to do something, and to win, and to be advantageous. Now if you look, the green marker is who won. Now also notice who made the most bribes, who made the most deals, and who honored the most deals. That was someone who, although they use something, they use things outside of what was considered trust, they built bridges of trust using those outlying actions in order to build a group, a faction. What they wanted to do was, every time they bribed somebody, they said, if you don't do this, I'll give you this amount. If you make a deal with me, I'll make sure I honor it. I actually follow through. That builds bridges of trust. And eventually, when you're playing a game of cheat, people don't call you out for cards, or they don't tell you that, well, you're cheating.
You're doing this and all these things. They trust you. They trust what you're doing. They trust that if you win, you're going to make sure that they're treated well in the end. It's my TED Talk.
Outstanding. All right, so now we pivot. In AP language, we ask students to research a topic in order to make a pitch for an argument to drive their course of study for their entire semester. And because she taught me to keep it simple, it's an honor to present Miss Macy Larson with her video proposal for minimalism.
Hello. How many of you guys have a closet full of clothes that you never wear? Or a 3-car garage that can only fit 1 car, maybe 2 on a good day? My name is Macy Larson, and I recently produced and edited this video about minimalism, which is not only the act of owning less, but being more intentional with the things that you do buy. I hand you the graphics and personally interviewed the minimalist expert featured in this video. I think the video speaks for itself, so without further ado, I hope you all enjoy.
He refutes all misconceptions and allows us to fully understand the true meaning of minimalism. Freedom. To grasp a deeper understanding of the topic at hand, I decided to interview someone who lives a minimalist life. I wanted to hear their experience firsthand and see what they thought. So meet Shauna, also known as Practically Minimal on Instagram.
That wasn't really something that I did intentionally at first. I actually started off with a shopping problem. So I was more of a shopaholic, I guess you might say. So eventually that built up. One weekend I just got really frustrated and spent 2 full days clearing out my closet. Once I was done, I just had like a whole new vibe, so I wanted to carry that on into the rest of my house.
Some people think that minimalism is all about getting rid of everything and being left with the absolute bare minimum. And that obviously sounds like no fun. But that's not actually what minimalism is all about. Minimalism is about getting rid of the things that clutter your life, whether that's physically or emotionally. I mean, there's a reason why this book is called The More of Less, because you'll find that in getting rid of things, you'll gain more than you ever had before.
So what's changed about my life since I started living more minimally? So many things. The most obvious is that I have, a lot less stuff, so there's a lot less clutter. So it makes things a little bit easier as far as, putting away a mess, cleaning up, just kind of maintaining your house in general. I also save time as far as like getting dressed in the morning, for example. I know that everything in my closet is something that fits and that I love to wear. So it makes the decisions a lot easier. Before I came into minimalism and decluttering my wardrobe, I was late for everything. Probably more of an unexpected change would be kind of getting into more of a mindfulness kind of a routine. So you start to think more intentionally about things. So more intentionally about the things that you want to bring into your home, of course, but also about the things that you like to do because you have more time to spend doing the things that you love.
So yeah, minimalism is great and all, but just like everything in life, there's always a downside.
I guess the first thing is that it's minimalism. It's not always, super easy to maintain. So even if you've gone through, the whole decluttering process and you've, decided what you need, use, and love, and you've only held on to those things, you still have to be really intentional about like what you decide to bring into your home. I think living minimalist or minimalish is worth it. 100%. It has, kind of like I said before, it's made my life a lot easier. Just maintaining my house is so much easier. I spend a lot less time cleaning. There's a lot fewer decisions to make.
As humans, we're all very different, but I think there's two things that we all have in common. We just want to be happy, and we also have a lot of stuff. Sometimes it feels like the only way to be happy is to buy that new phone that just came out, or the $400 belt, because they're going to fit in with the other kids at school. But then we end up being left with excessive amounts of stuff that we don't even know what to do with. And that makes us sad, and then to be happy again, we just buy more stuff. It's a reckless cycle that leads us absolutely nowhere. But minimalism ends that cycle. It doesn't cut off spending completely. It doesn't force you to live a very boring life. It allows you to experience what you've been wanting all along, and brings you the joys that material items never could. So, I don't know about you, but I'm extremely motivated to clean up my entire house right now and start living a different life. One with less clutter and more intention. Maybe it's time we all discover the more of less.
I'm so proud of that. Okay, we will now take a brief intermission, take some time to stretch, think, double the scholarship fund, whatever, and we will be back in 5 minutes, 7:05. Thank you, guys. I meant 8:05, of course. 8:05. Nailed it. Clocks.
But like it's gonna look like this, if that makes sense.
Hey, you look like a grown-up. Is that nice? Like if I, well, I don't think this is gonna stay.
I don't think that's gonna work. Because the words are up here.
Right.
The light's shining this way.
Well, I'm trying to illuminate your face. That's what, now this is my son podium's kind of the thing right there.
I don't know either.
What are you shaking? Are those names? Okay, I had that on my to-do list back here. Okay, got it. Okay, so maybe that's better. Hopefully that's better.
Hopefully, we'll
So
see.
yeah, we're gonna find out here momentarily.
Okay,
Okay.
cool. I don't anticipate I'll need it, but
I
like,
think you're gonna be
I
just fine.
just want to know,
You're
like,
just-
I can read it in case I need to.
You're gonna be just fine. Right?
Yeah.
So you make it up and it's gonna sound brilliant.
Might have to just skip a little section if you can't read it.
Right. You're gonna be you will read it just fine. You only say 'cause you're right there, like eye level.
Okay. Got it.
Hey, Mr. Rupp.
Hey, yes.
After I finish the spiel, am I gonna hand them? Do you want me to hand the microphone?
I'll
back to
be
you?
out here.
Sweet.
Yep. All right, let's get back to it here in a minute. All right. Hello, hello. Man, that light is just always so bright. Every time. Every time. All right. So thank you so much for taking your seat, and thank you for the generosity in donating to the Erie X Scholarship. We'll keep the buckets open, the donations open on the website through a few more presentations. And so, let's kick this off with another one of my AP Lang students, the wonderful Mr. Jackson Pace.
Good evening, everyone. Over the course of the past month and a half, infrastructure, the word infrastructure, has become a bit of a buzzword, percolating through our politics and spreading throughout the media, with some advocating for multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure packages covering everything from electric vehicles to home insulation, with others advocating for a much more focused and narrow approach. But regardless of partisan differences over how to pay for such a plan or what should even be included, what I set out to find in my video tonight was what is happening to American infrastructure. What is happening to American ports, bridges, tunnels, you name it, and why? As you'll notice, I don't really have much of a solution to this problem, and at the end, I leave the question of how, as in how to fix it, pretty open-ended. But what I hope to leave with all of you tonight is the answer to the question of why. Why infrastructure is so important, why it affects each and every single one of us, and why important investments in infrastructure today are critical to the continued success of our nation tomorrow. Thank you. I hope you enjoy my video.
Progress, a breeding ground for new innovations, the cultural heart of the nation, had become something that has defined the American dream for decades. These days, however, many American cities are, well, less than extraordinary. Need I say more? It goes without saying that cities and urban areas in general are constantly evolving. That's what makes cities so economically and culturally valuable in the first place. But suffering from an ever-growing population, with 89% of Americans estimated to be living in cities by the year 2050, the status of the infrastructure in America simply can no longer be left alone. So, how did we get here? In its simplest form, American infrastructure has just been ignored. That means the bridges, the airports, the roads, literally everything that we rely on to get around basically anywhere is being left decrepit and derelict, entirely non-existent in some areas, and in many cases, literally falling apart.
See that structure underneath it? They actually built that to catch in the fallen concrete so there wouldn't be traffic underneath it.
Yikes. Just to remind you, that's not in some rural underdeveloped backwater. That's in Pittsburgh. When it comes to bridge structures alone, the American Society of Civil Engineers, or ASCE for short, estimated in its 2021 National Infrastructure Report Card that there are more than 46,000 structurally deficient bridges in America, with 474 of those bridges located right here in Colorado. Still don't believe that U.S. investment in infrastructure is severely lacking? Let's compare the suburban map of Amsterdam, the bustling city and economic hub of the Netherlands, comparable in population to Denver, to the public metro map of the entire Denver metro area. Yeah, pretty underwhelming.
What's the difference? Ignorance is bliss, my friend.
Sorry, bad guy from Batman Begins, but when it comes to infrastructure, ignorance simply isn't bliss. In fact, it's quite the contrary. When the literal lifelines of a country are left unmaintained and in a state of disrepair, the consequences can be dire. Take Italy, for example, who, after the 2008 global recession, fell from one of Europe's largest spenders in infrastructure to one of the lowest. This fall from pragmatic European transportation leadership had deadly consequences. In 2018, a highway viaduct collapsed in the southern city of Genoa, killing over 40 people, an incident led largely on the lack of governmental investment in infrastructure in recent decades. The fact of the matter is that the United States has fallen gravely behind its international peers when it comes to infrastructure investments. China, Australia, Belarus all spend considerably more of their GDP on infrastructure than the United States does. Look, there we are, right at the bottom. In Jane Jacobs' book, The Death and Life of American Cities, that's her right there, she does a renowned 20th century planner. She explains, quote, cities have the capability of providing something for everybody, only because and only when they are created by everybody. When our investment in infrastructure is lacking, we fail to uphold this very logic. You see, Jane observed the many issues that mid-20th century urban planning had on the American noting, quote, "Under the seeming disorder of the old city, wherever the old city is working successfully, is a marvelous order for maintaining the safety of the streets and the freedom of the city." Thanks, Jane. Now, it's not like we as Americans simply are incapable of providing quality infrastructure to all. Take FDR's Works Progress Administration of the 1930s and 40s.
Vital to the communities which they serve are the thousands of miles of highways, constructed and improved by the Works program. The need for first-class highways grows constantly. The automobile and the motor truck become increasingly important in both city and rural commerce.
Now, you probably don't remember the immediate effects of this initiative because none of us were alive at this time, but the point remains the same. The federal government stepped in at a time of great national need, given that this was during the Depression, and utilized its $1.3 billion budget, worth almost $20 billion today, to build engineering marvels and infrastructure projects not just for the sake of building, but for the genuine betterment of society. At a time of similar economic downturn as the nation reels from the effects of COVID-19, a new deal for the American people, a new green one perhaps, doesn't sound like too bad of an idea. Politics aside, I won't try to tell you that I somehow have a solution to all of these problems, because I don't. Transportation infrastructure is a heavily nuanced issue involving everything from economics to racial inequality. But it is abundantly clear that a continuation of the status quo, in which a complete lack of federal oversight and leadership leaves some of the country's best and brightest without adequate means of transport and at risk of death, must be immediately ended. For the United States to truly remain a world power, we must reinvigorate this need to build, this desire to reform that was so prevalent in early 1900s America. Perhaps with this heightened set in mind, policymakers from Washington to a municipal level will take a status check on our competitiveness in the field of infrastructure by asking the following question. When it comes to infrastructure, are we good?
Outstanding work, Jackson Pace. And now, to present her findings in regards to the increasing plastic sustainability, my co-star in Saturday's one-act plays, AP Research's Miss Madeleine Brown.
Clicker. I have it, it's not working.
Oh, something's happening here. What happens when you click?
Nothing. Oh? Yeah.
I work at a dog daycare, so most of my best ideas are the result of dog poop. In this instance, my personal plastic revolution started with the longer than necessary walk I used to make 5 times a week to dispose of the gross, smelly dog poop that had been sitting all day. Trust me, the smell of our trash would prompt any of you to want to change the world. As I was toting the 3 separate trash bags we use throughout the day to dispose of the various messes the dogs make, it hit me. Why 3? Yes, there is quite a lot of trash we need to throw away, but the bags are only filled about halfway, so mostly we are throwing away unused plastic bags. And what does plastic do in landfills? Approximately nothing. It takes about 1,000 years for plastic bags of that size to decompose fully. And that's not even the scariest fact relating to plastic lifespan. Every single plastic toothbrush you have ever used still exists. Even if you think you're being smart by buying an electric toothbrush, where all you have to do is replace the heads, every single ped you have used still persists. Doing what? I'm glad you asked. Polluting waterways. Every year, about 8 million tons of plastic waste escapes into the oceans from coastal nations. That's the equivalent of setting 5 garbage bags full of trash on every foot of coastline around the world. As scary as this is, and as much as I hate to say it, there isn't much we can do. We have integrated plastics so heavily into our societal functions that eliminating synthetics isn't a true reality. We use plastics in necessary medical equipment, such as IV bags, prosthetics, and disposable syringes. We also interact with plastics in our everyday lives without even noticing it. Our cars, food packaging, clothes, technology, furniture, and homes are made of plastic. Ask yourselves, If plastic were to completely disappear tomorrow, would you be able to function? I'm telling you right now, if your answer to that question was even remotely close to yes, you're lying to yourself. And that's the problem. Our reliance on synthetic plastics is killing our world, and as a result, us. Now, whoever brought you here tonight didn't do so to make you listen to me rant about the paradox that is our plastic problem. I do have a solution, and it can be found in bioplastic alternatives. Namely, my favorite things currently, polyhydroxyalkanates, or PHAs for those of you who thought I just spoke a different language. PHAs are fully compostable plastic alternatives, and the brilliant thing about them is that they are nearly identical to synthetics. They have the same density, durability, and usability. However, once again, we run into a new problem. Because synthetic options were our first choice and have been around longer, their manufacturing industry has had all the time in the world to nearly eliminate the competition. They are easier, cheaper, and faster to manufacture. This isn't the end for my PHAs, though, and it wasn't the end for another research party that studied a concurrent manufacturing system for PHAs. This is a fancy way of saying they found a way to make PHAs while doing something else. The doing something else in their case was disposing of wastewater. Doing so lowers the price of manufacturing while also increasing the efficiency of both systems, allowing PHAs a very good fighting chance against synthetic plastics. Inspired by their brilliant work, I wondered, why not use compost facilities? I mean, it's not wastewater, but it's still waste, and bokashi composting, a Japanese style of composting, sets up the exact same way the wastewater does in terms of fermentation and the retention times of solids and liquids, which also happens to be the exact variables you need to manipulate in order to promote PHA appearance. So, after justifying my hatred of synthetic plastics and finding a way to possibly remove their overbearance in my life, I dared to ask the question: to what extent, if any, does the ability to modify phosphorus, nitrogen, carbon, and oxygen in compost bins allow for polyhydroxyalkanates to be produced in order to determine and expand the accessibility of bioplastics? To answer this question, I started by making the compost bins that my bacteria-creating PHAs would eventually be calling home. This process was relatively simple. I gathered all the food scraps I came across and put them in a bucket. The ones that contained phosphorus or nitrogen went in bin 1, and the ones that didn't went in bin 2. And then I let them sit for about 2 weeks to ferment. Once the 12-day fermentation period ended, I introduced my E. coli to their new home, where they would be able to eat for 2 days straight. Afterwards, I removed them from their buffet and put them in bin 2, which contained absolutely no nutrients they desired, and let them go through a 1-day famine. This change in environment is the direct cause of PHA appearance. When any bacteria abruptly runs out of their food stores, they freak out. This freak out causes them to make emergency food stores. In a few select amount of bacteria, one of which is E. coli, these food stores can then be extracted and turned into PHA pellets, which make up PHA plastic. Once the famine was over, I collected my poor baby E. coli and studied them for any PHA appearance. This is what I found. As expected, before going through the feast-famine cycle, there was no presence of PHA. Why would there be? The E. coli has never had to make their own food. But then, after going through the feast-famine cycle, they persevered and produced PHAs. In fact, all of my colonies produced anywhere from 5 to 20% of their body mass in PHAs. These numbers mean a whole lot for the world of bioplastics as we know it. But before I could get all excited, and trust me, I was absolutely pumped about my experiment succeeding, I had to truly understand the implications of what I had just found. Yes, I made plastic in my kitchen, but is that really sustainable? Kinda. In order for something to be sustainable, it needs to pass a few tests. First, does the manufacturing process's presence impede on or upset any human habitats in the area? Compost facilities have had a hard time in my local area. Just recently, my town announced that they would be building one, and immediately there was public outroar. People were worried about the smell. Luckily, the compost system I utilized in this experiment uses anaerobic fermentation, so no smell is produced while the composting is happening. So, that's test 1 passed. The second test is a little more tricky to talk about. In order for my experiment to be developmentally sustainable, it needs to be economically viable, which means, compared to synthetics, it has to be cheaper to buy and sell. The only way for this to be possible is if the percent yield of my colonies are higher than 50. Unfortunately, as you have seen, that's not quite the case. With future experimentation, my desires are to increase the percent yield, but as it stands, my experiment does not pass the economics test. The final test, and arguably the most important, is the overall environmental impact. In this case, we're very lucky to be compared to synthetic plastics. The bar is set so low, and my PHAs pass with flying colors. Not only do they not use fossil fuels, but they recycle food waste that would otherwise be thrown out. So, when considering all of these factors together, it's easy to say that my plastics are more sustainable than synthetic options. So please, in honor of Earth Day, if you learn anything from this presentation, hold corporations accountable in using less plastic or bioplastic alternatives. In doing so, the demand for synthetic plastics go down, and then so does the production and pollution. Remember, there is no planet B. Thank you.
Folks, $677. Nice work. And don't be shy, like you could put more in, or, however you want to do it. It's up to you, really. So now we enter that portion of the evening where I don't know any of this, and I've never heard of any of these things at all. Never even once. But I can't wait to learn about them. In our next presentation, I'm confident that Pyrodeinos is a powerful and rare dragon-type Pokemon. Has to be. But let's allow Miss Savannah Venard from AP Research to inform you properly.
Hello, everyone. Where's the clicker? Do we have the clicker?
Oh, you have the clicker.
I do. Hi, everyone. So, welcome to my presentation, Toxic Pyrodeinos. And I know you're probably sitting there going, what in the world is a pyrodino? Now, if you look at the word and break it into the two parts, pyro and dino, you're probably thinking fire dinosaurs, which, although that would be cool, I'm actually talking about dinoflagellate bioluminescence, also known as bioluminescent plankton or bioluminescent algae. They go by all the different names. Now, the special thing about these little organisms is that they glow, and they light up the beaches at night. So, at night, they're absolutely gorgeous. Look at this. These bioluminescent creatures are so amazing and so expansive. In fact, 70% of the ocean's creatures are bioluminescent. And while these look amazing at night, during the day, they're actually deep red and can look like blood flowing over the sea, blocking sunlight. National Geographic says that bioluminescent dinoflagellates are a type of plankton, tiny marine organisms that can sometimes cause the surface of the ocean to sparkle at night. Bioluminescent dinoflagellates produce the light using a luciferase reaction. Now, this reaction is the key to everything. So, luciferin is produced within the bioluminescent plankton, and within their environment, they absorb luciferase. This is what allows them to glow, and they only get enough power to glow once every 24 hours. With this glow, they have three main purposes. First one is finding food. It's dark, you need something to eat, shine a little light, find something to munch on. That's great. The second one is defense mechanism, so they don't become something that something else eats. So you glow, you get away, and it's a nice little distraction. The third reason is, of course, reproductive purposes. Get a glow, find a fun mate, everything's great, you're growing, and that's why there's 70%. Now, this luciferin-luciferase reaction led me to find out that it's actually a substrate enzyme-based reaction. With substrates and enzymes, there's actually a perfect fit, which means there's some form of the substrate and the enzyme that fit together so well that they process these chemicals so much faster, they're able to produce a glow faster, meaning that they can glow more than one time in a day. And this led me to my research question. To what extent, if any, does the luciferase source of dinoflagellate bioluminescence organisms affect the toxicity by the indicators of pH, salinity, and biological oxygen demand within their niche environment? So, this is where I got into my experiment. I had 3 weeks. I had 4 different fish bowls, I had 3 types of luciferase, and 8 bags of plankton. Now, within the 4 tanks, each one got 2 bags of plankton. My first tank was a control tank where it received no luciferase and therefore hindered their ability to produce a glow. The second bowl got luciferase A, tank 3 got luciferase B, and tank D got luciferase D. So, what did I find from this? If you look in salinity, the specific gravity of the ocean is naturally around 1.025, which is, roughly 1,025 kilograms per meter cubed of liquid. Now, when you look at the experiment throughout the time, if you look at tank A, our blue one, it remained pretty steady at roughly 1. However, all the other tanks increased in salinity, meaning that it drove up the levels of salt, which makes it harder for other organisms living in the water to both survive due to the increased toxicity. Now, the second available testing was pH. This is measured on a typical pH balance scale. And all the tanks started at 6. Now, throughout the experiment, tank A, which received no luciferase and didn't glow, remained at a steady 6. Meanwhile, all the other tanks fluctuated, but ultimately ended with a pH of 5, meaning they got more toxic. Now, a lower pH makes it harder for oxygen to disperse through the water. And my final indicator of toxicity was biological oxygen demand, which is measured in milligrams of oxygen per liter. Now, biological oxygen demand doesn't actually have any standard measurement, and that's due to the fact that it's based on the amount of oxygen needed by all the organisms per liter in order to survive. So what this means is you don't want to have a high biological oxygen demand because there's a limited amount of oxygen being produced. So if you look at tank A, the control tank, it stayed pretty steady. It stayed roughly around 1, topped off at about 2. When you look at all the other ones, tank B, tank C, and tank D, which received luciferase, allowing them to glow, they rose exponentially, which in theory would be fine. However, when you look back at the pictures where they started growing rapidly and created that red sea, it prohibits any light from reaching the seafloor, which allows photosynthesis to take place in the plants that live in the seafloor. So what does this all mean? Due to the fact that all 3 indicators came back as becoming more toxic as more oxygen or as more luciferase is present, it means that it creates an overall more toxic environment. However, there is no discernible difference between the 3 types of luciferase I tested. So, therefore, there is no supreme substrate enzyme complex that would allow it to grow. However, any presence of luciferase can cause issues. So the new understanding that I reached within this experiment is so long as dinoflagellates are present in an environment that has luciferase, they can cause toxic shellfish poisoning because the plankton themselves become toxic and the shellfish eat them, making the shellfish toxic. Now, this can cause a more serious issue because as soon as humans fish these and eat them, they become super sick and can even cause death. And similarly, because they grow so rapidly, it blocks all sunlight and oxygen production, meaning it suffocates the other animals living in the environment with them. Now, considering that these bioluminescent organisms create 70% of the marine environment, we need to focus more attention into researching them. If these fish are so powerful that they can wipe out entire populations and even kill humans, then maybe we need to be focusing more effort on this. My biggest limitations in this experiment were money and time. First of all, luciferase is really expensive. For about a gram of powder, it costs around $100, so I was only able to test 3 of the 26 different types available. So of the 26, we can safely assume that there's probably one that has the perfect substrate enzyme complex fit. Secondly, we need more time. I was set on a 3-week schedule. I was able to do 10 days of testing, while the first week of it was reserved for adjusting their circadian rhythm in order to get their glow cycles right. So with more time, we can see the long-term effects of these toxic spikes, where if they grow really fast, do the plankton die really fast? We also need more testing into the availability of their interactions with other creatures due to the fact that they control the oxygen they receive. That's all.
I will take your clicker, and you can pass that off over there.
Ooh, extra note cards. Okay, so we're down to about 15 minutes left. We have 2 presentations remaining. This is your last chance coming up to make any donations. And when did that happen? We're over 700, folks. And now, to discuss Floriography, another thing I know nothing about. Speech and Debate's own Oliver Ramirez.
Let me paint you a picture. You're cuddled up on the couch Monday night watching this week's episode of The Bachelor. You're waiting on the edge of your seat, eagerly waiting to see who the Bachelor will send home and who will keep. You watch as he makes his critical decision in his path for love on red roses. Now, why is it that we see him make his decision on red roses and not some other flower? Well, red roses today are seen as a symbol of love. Now, this is nothing new. In ancient Greece, it was believed that roses had been created by Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Today, we still see red roses as the perfect gift for Valentine's Day and anniversaries, as they symbolize our love and passion for one another. Now, today, I'm not here to tell you about roses or love. I'm here to tell you about Floriography, the language of flowers. You might now be thinking, what is he talking about? Well, I'll explain, but first, picture the Victorian era. You might think of the fancy clothes or the architecture. Yes, those are relevant, but it was in the Victorian era where Floriography began, a system of communication where flowers were assigned specific meanings and symbols used to give secret messages. Now, understanding Floriography allows us to look how far language can extend beyond just the words we say and find new ways to add kindness into our lives. Today, I'll be sharing the origins of Floriography, what Floriography is exactly and how it was used, and Floriography today. To understand the origins of Floriography, we need to know the social expectations of the Victorian era. Now, primarily among the upper class, proper etiquette was a constant expectation. This sometimes prohibited flirting, asking questions, but also just conversations in general. Now, people did what people often do. They overcame. People didn't settle for restricted conversations, they simply found new ways to communicate, a true testament to the resiliency of humans and a notion to the idea that love conquers all. Now, Floriography allows us to look at what exactly people were using to communicate. Now, assigning of symbols and associations with flowers didn't start in the Victorian era, rather centuries before in ancient Europe, Asia, and Africa. However, it was in the Victorian era flowers were being used as communication systems. According to Catherine Buechman, an author at the Old Farmer's Almanac, nearly all Victorian homes had, alongside a Bible, guidebooks for deciphering the language of flowers. Floriography was not something that a few people here and there were using. It was something people were expected to be able to understand and be able to use. In a time where conversation was being limited and restricted, people turned to flowers as the next best thing, and thus Floriography began. Now that we know the origins of Floriography, we can look at what exactly Floriography is. Now, in Floriography, flowers are assigned and associated with specific meanings and symbols. For example, daisies, a very well-known flower today, used to symbolize innocence and hope. If a daisy was present in a bouquet, it would add a layer of hopefulness or innocence to what other flowers would be conveying. A variety of flowers would be used to layer up different meanings to create one cohesive message. Now, not all flowers were as straightforward as the daisy. Ivies, for example, were more complicated, symbolizing marriage, fidelity, and friendship. It's clear how meanings could easily be misunderstood. To combat this, people used the tiny details that they could get away with, such as the way a ribbon on a bouquet faced. In the Victorian era, knowing your lefts from your rights was incredibly important. To give a bouquet over with your left hand was seen as a rejection or no, whereas giving it away with your right hand was seen as yes. In some scenario where you were given a bouquet that symbolized friendship, you could potentially respond by handing over with your right hand a bouquet that included flowers symbolizing friendship and hopefulness. This would then indicate to that person you were interested in being friends as well. Now, there was more to Floriography than just love and kindness and friendship. Flowers such as the orange lily symbolized hatred and disdain. There was flowers for everything. The variety of flowers used and the tiny details allowed for the most meaning in a bouquet as possible and allowed flowers to be used as an effective means of communication. By now, you might have had the thought cross your mind, is Floriography still a thing today? Fortunately, social expectations allow for conversations and flirting and asking questions. The need for Floriography is seemingly gone. However, there are many businesses, such as Lux Floristry, that use Floriography in their advertising. Lux Floristry is a bouquet company that provides flowers for weddings and large events. By using Floriography in their advertising, guests and customers expect beautiful bouquets that have some deeper meaning. Even with this current Floriography business, Floriography as a language has stayed a thing of the past. However, today we still see flowers used as symbols in media, often representing innocence or hopefulness or love. Now, there are many ways we can use Floriography in our everyday lives. For those interested in building custom bouquets with deeper meanings, the internet is the best resource. With a quick Google search, you can find hundreds of flowers' meanings in seconds, and by using flower shops, you can build custom bouquets to give to a loved one. While this does require extra work and extra steps, it goes the extra mile to show the ones you care about just how much you care. Now, if these extra steps required are not really your thing, there are other options. In the Victorian era, many artists used flowers in their paintings rather than just physically. These paintings were all done by Martin Johnson Heade. They all add some sort of meaning to the painting, or as we see on the furthest left, the painting is entirely of a bouquet representing devotion. For those in the audience with an interest in art, you can consider using flowers that have some deeper meaning to add to the complexity and message that your art is conveying. Something as simple as texting a friend a picture of a flower, telling them what it means and that it reminded you of them can show them just how you feel about them. Sometimes words are not enough to convey how strongly we feel about emotions. By using Floriography, we can show how we feel through actions rather than just words. Now, in our lives, it's easy to overlook these small, simple actions we take in our lives as we focus on the grand scheme of things. However, it's important to not minimize the importance of small, minimal acts of kindness that we take in our lives as they add extra positivity and love into our chaotic lives. Floriography reminds us to be intentional about the way we move through the world. And by using the knowledge you've learned today about the origins of Floriography, how it was used, and Floriography today, you can be deliberate and thoughtful about the ways you bring joy and happiness to the ones you know. Thank you.
All right. Before we get into our grand finale, I wanted to thank all of you again for being here tonight. The kids are having a great time, and you've been wonderful as well. All right, here we go, the final one, with a discussion about the evolution of American slang. Mr. Robert Welch.
OMG. Do you guys see my fit right now? It's fire, right? I took some pics for the gram earlier. Now, to non-teenagers, that exchange probably seemed weird or confusing, even awkward. However, to the younger minds, it makes complete sense. Acronyms like OMG, shortened words like fit for outfit, and homonyms like fire meaning cool are just a few of the ways that modern teenage slang is reshaping our language. Today we're here exploring the evolution of modern teenage speech. From the history of acronyms, initialisms, and textisms, to the impact of racial gatekeeping, linguistic shifting, and body language. Since the creation of the middle class, teenage speech has had a rich, sometimes controversial history. Teenage language over the years has grown, shortened, and adapted as the widespread use of slang and acronyms was adopted. Throughout the history of English, words have been created, changed, and modified to better suit the current social politics of speech. This is commonly shown in our everyday use of modern acronyms. However, before we dive into our modern use of acronyms, we first need to understand the history of abbreviations as a whole. Initialisms were the first known use of an abbreviation, first seen in use in 1844. Initialisms are a form of abbreviation in which each initial is pronounced individually. YourDictionary.com gives us an example of this. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, or as we pronounce it, FBI, pronouncing every letter individually. Acronyms, on the other hand, are a form of abbreviation in which we pronounce the initials as a separate word. Let's look at NASA, for example, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. However, we pronounce it as NASA, a separate word, not NASA. Now, it's easy to see how you may not have known there was a difference, but it's important in understanding how the use of abbreviations has increased so much over the years. In fact, many modern-day companies probably use abbreviations for their brand name, and you might not even know it. Now, I'm going to need some audience participation here. I'm going to put brand logos on the screen, and by show of hands, I want you all to let me know whether or not you think their brand name is some sort of an abbreviation. We'll start off easy with a household name, KFC. Raise your hand if you think KFC is some sort of abbreviation. Most of us, right? If you're raising your hand, you'd be right. KFC is an initialism for Kentucky Fried Chicken. But how about Geico? How many of you guys think Geico is some sort of abbreviation? Raise your hand. Not as many of us. However, if you're raising your hand, you'd be right. Geico actually stands for the Government Employee Insurance Company, which is what they were created to target. Now, last one, Yahoo. How many of you guys think Yahoo is some sort of abbreviation? Go ahead and raise your hand. Almost none of us. However, if you do have your hand raised, you're again right. Yahoo actually stands for yet another hierarchical officious oracle. And that was a lot to say. And if you asked me what it means or why they chose it as their brand name, I honestly couldn't tell you. But it goes to show how common abbreviations have become in our everyday speech. Now, shortening words has been around in the English language for hundreds of years. However, due to the digital age of social media, this process has seen widespread adoption in not only speech, but everyday life. Today in 2021, everyone is pressed for time, relatively speaking, of course, because with the ability to instantly communicate with your peers, patience has quickly become a thing of the past, and instant communication has become the norm. According to a study conducted by the Economic Times in 2018, the attention span of the average human has been lowered from 12 seconds to just 8 seconds in 2013, all the way down to 5 seconds in 2018. This shortening attention span has led to people becoming increasingly impatient in every sense, including with their speech, with modern texting language consisting of highly shortened words and phrases, like typing TY instead of thank you, or using abbreviations like OMG and LOL. These words are known as textisms. Textisms can be characterized by any word that is commonly used when texting. Texting and its textisms has become the front runner for shortening words in our everyday speech. Now I want you guys to think about that for a moment. Think about a word or phrase that you use on a daily or semi-daily basis. Everyone have one? Now imagine how you'd send that as a text message. Would you still fully type it out? Now, I know that results will vary by age, as teenagers are statistically more likely to use textisms. However, for me, the answer was no, and two phrases came to mind. Good night and on my way. I probably use these phrases daily or semi-daily, yet I also see them heavily shortened in text. It's common for me to see or use GN for good night, or OMW for on my way. And it almost feels awkward to fully type out these messages as a teen. Though linguistic shifting and slang has been around since humans have been communicating, the modern impacts of technology are still heavily present in our understanding of body language. To fully understand why we feel awkward when texting, we first need to know about the impact that body language, or the lack thereof, has on how we communicate. Quick show of hands, how many of you guys use emojis when you text? A good majority of us, right? Emojis are the pinnacle of conveying tone through text message. Without the ability to subconsciously read body language, our brains are constantly searching for ways to judge the tone of incoming messages. And with over 3,000 different emojis and emoticons to use, we can display any emotion that we want and completely change the tone of our message. However, this doesn't always work out how we want it to. The shortening of words is not the only way that modern teenage slang has evolved. The use of other words as homonyms and synonyms to their more common counterparts has also become the norm amongst teens. The creation of use of alternate words has become a norm. And there are multiple reasons that led to the creation of this, including teens wanting to create a unique identity for themselves, the need to fit into specific social groups, or the need to be secretive from overbearing parents and guardians. Much of modern teenage slang actually originates from the African American community. So much so that there has been a term created, AAVE, which stands for African American Vernacular English, and it represents the variety of English spoken mainly within African American communities. Many words that we now use in common teenage language actually were created as AAVE. Words such as lit and extra, or phrases like straight up, are a few common examples of words that are, quote, often misused or overemphasized, end quote. According to a study posted through Stanford University, AAVE has long been considered an inferior English, which raises some important questions about racial gatekeeping. In truth, however, AAVE is not a form of broken English, so to speak, but rather a prime example of linguistic shifting. Linguistic shifting is the process by which a speech community moves or shifts into a different language, dialect, or speech pattern. AAVE is a prime example of this. According to that same Stanford study, AAVE most closely resembles a dialect of English rather than a broken form of English itself. It is this close relationship, along with the popularity of African American music and musicians, that has led to the overlap in slang words. While acronyms like LOL have already seen widespread adoption or are mainstream, so to speak, many more acronyms are being phased out of slang and adopted as common use to the masses. Acronyms like OMG have already began to see an increase in use. Now, while this is true for slang terms, or for acronyms, the same is not true for slang terms. Slang terms don't as often assimilate into everyday speech, but rather more often see a decrease in use. A prime example of this from 2015 to 2016 was the word yeet. Yeet had been used, or at least understood, by every teenager at the time. And it was commonly popularized through the use of memes and viral dance videos, like this one here. But now, the word has become obsolete, as it has been phased out, so to speak. However, as I mentioned earlier, not all slang terms phase out of speech. In fact, a common phrase term that we now should all know, fake news, was actually popularized in 2016. However, it has seen a steady increase in usage rather than a steady decrease in usage that we might be used to. This is mainly due to its use from authority figures, as authority figures tend to carry a higher weight in social circles. And slang terms and their popularity is directly linked to media. Now that you know more about the evolution and history of teenage slang, hopefully the conversations that you have or overhear seem a little bit less foreign. Who knows? Maybe you'll even start using some slang terms yourself. They're more catchy than you think. Thank you.
All right. So, before we give away a bag of money, it's time to appreciate everybody who put in so much work to keep this event, to revive this event this year. Thank you to our administrator, our overseer, the champion of Erie X, Mrs. Liz Russell. Hey, there you go. Thank you to our Dean of Students and Technology Savant, Mr. Paul Stasina, for getting everything to work in this room. Thank you to the Erie Tiger Network Patriarch, Mr. Brandon Bird, for getting everything in your screens at home. Thank you to the teachers who encouraged and inspired their students to perform in this event. Mrs. Allison Arita from Speech and Debate, Mrs. Laura Munnelly from AP Lang, Mrs. Judy Trinkner from Creative Writing, and Ms. Caitlin Gintert from AP Research. Thank you to all the students who were willing to share these ideas with us. And I got another one. I'll do it now. And the sincerest thank you to the parents, families, and support systems which led these students to end up in front of us tonight. So, before we call it a night, let's select our scholarship recipient. Do I pick?
You pick.
Oh, that's a lot. Give me that one. Okay. And our winner is, from AP Research, Miss Allie Morton. Congratulations. Oh. I wish we had like a comically large check. I have nothing. This is all ceremony. You can have your name. We'll get it to you soon. Congratulations. And again, thank you all for being a part of the Erie Tiger community and supporting our students. Drive safe.